What's up, Rockstars? Today we have some crazy news. We have an explosive campaign shot past 1 million and is a fantastic product, but there's something I gotta warn you about on that one. We have some really indie games that are really struggling. We're gonna cover some of those, see if they're a good fit for you, maybe, maybe not, maybe see what the issue is there, and a huge blow to the entire Kickstarter industry for board games right now.
Thank you to my channel sponsor Into the AM. As a company that believes hard work and a great product is a proper way to conduct business, I am delighted to have them as part of the channel. They have some of the coolest graphic t-shirts around and an absolute best fit and feel that has continually exceeded my expectations. With new shirts arriving all the time and other products like boxers, hats, and even a monthly shirt club, I wholeheartedly recommend them to you. Check out the link in my description of this video for an exclusive 10% off everything they sell.
Alright, so hopefully this is the last video I filmed from this location, or at least this style of video. This is my painting desk, actually. I have to build my editing desk, my filming desk over there. Board game table comes today. There's a lot moving, but you guys complained about the white background, so I stuck some nerd crap up for you real quick. So you're welcome. Let's dive in. Cities Untold, Lowtown TTRPG Terrain by Dwarven Forge. It's a long title. Really, the key is Dwarven Forge. And then cities, okay, with the Lowtown probably the kind of the subheader there. Dwarven Forge does amazing work. I actually saw their setup of this at Gen Con. I covered it in my video. I'll go and link down to it in the description below. It's a kind of a short video. You can go ahead and watch it and see this all in action. They have like smokestacks and LEDs and all sorts of stuff. So you guys can check out what it would look like in the flesh. I stand there and I show some nice B-roll. It's really great. I'm not going to do that right now. But they even gave me some samples. And I have purposely just chucked them in boxes during the move, stuff like that, to see if they would ship, to see, how the wear is on that. They're immaculate, guys. They look great. They are a fantastic quality. Now, this is essentially a Lowtown kind of ramshackle almost city. It's got like these bridges and it's all made of wood and the docks are there and stuff, and it looks great. If you didn't know, this is essentially you're buying terrain, or at least modular terrain. As you can see, that kind of locks in to make your RPGs come to life, or even your board games. I've seen people use this for the background of a board game. So if it's one of the games where you can sit on a table and play, that behind it will be that kind of sets the mood, if that makes sense. It's very cool to do that. I've seen people just insert these in place of board games. Now, it depends on the scale, of course, of everything. This is definitely meant for compatibility with D&D. So the scale is a little bit smaller, more of a 28 millimeter than a 35 millimeter. But you can kind of make the judge of that. But I mean, when they talk about like incredibly durable and they show the hammer there, no joke, you could probably take a hammer to it and it would not break. It might break apart because it's meant to break apart, but like it won't shatter or anything like that. Very good stuff, and just a super high quality. All comes pre-painted, and the painting is done extremely well. It is just incredible how they make these and how they are able to make the city kind of come alive with different things. I can't speak highly enough about it. However, something I have to warn you about, as we start getting to these prices, you're going to see that it very quickly gets to $1,000 or $4,000 or $6,000, and that is not for everything. You could easily spend $10,000 here. So here's my advice. If you're a normal person like me, and not one of those lucky ones that can drop that kind of money, then just something like this actually will get you a long way, especially this mega pack here, because you can rearrange it. I think there's actually a GIF of them showing it, but I think it's down lower. Let me see if I can get that for you guys. Just kind of the modularity of it. You can do a lot there. You'll have to like set it up or change it or whatever, but especially for a big encounter or starting things out or just being thematic with it, it will go a long way here. Yeah, it's this right here. So as you can see, just a little building like this can be rearranged in quite a few different ways to kind of suit your needs. So don't feel bad just getting a little bit. However, if you are Moneybags McGee and you have the money to spend, and this is really your passion to do, if you're a professional dungeon master, if you do any kind of, if you're a company that wants to just have a great display at a convention or something like that for your miniatures, you could put them in something like this even. There's a lot of reasons for this, but you can get not only the landmarks and pick and choose from those. This is for 2 of these, by the way, or an entire district, which this is a massive amount, guys. This is a ton. But they're going to have all sorts of stuff. They're going to have little fog machines so the chimneys can produce smoke. They're going to have LEDs. They're going to have all sorts of stuff. Seriously, it's really, really cool, guys. It's amazing. It's incredible, and it's expensive. So anyway, that is that. Feel free to check that out. 14 days, so 2 weeks to go there. Steve Jackson's Games, Box of Astonishments. A loot box for board games. Kind of. It's a loot box because you don't know what you're getting. You're just getting stuff. It's not a loot box in the sense that none of it, like all of it is pre-existing stuff. Actually, some of it might even be new releases. Though, I mean, I think that's kind of highly unlikely. Essentially, they need warehouse space. They need to move warehouse. They could do something like a sale and like, kind of try and do their web store thing and stuff like that. But a lot of this stuff just isn't selling for a variety of reasons and just kind of needs to move and move quickly. So they decided to make this $100 box where they're just going to shove their stuff in there. At least $160 worth. There's a whole lot of like stretch goals and stuff. And there's also a $125 box that has essentially one of the things signed in there. So they're going to have a variety of stuff. A lot of it's going to be stuff like dice, accessories. You might get a full Munchkin game. You might get an expansion to something. Honestly, to me, it doesn't seem like a great deal. I used to do loot boxes. In fact, if you scroll far enough down in my video history, you'll see me even unboxing loot boxes. Little baby KOA, not knowing what he's doing on YouTube yet. And I did it with my daughter, and she really enjoyed them. But it got to the point where I was spending this money. While it's technically worth that, I only really wanted 1, maybe 2 things in it. That like I would have, and maybe only one of them I would have actually paid money for. But it also means that if you are really into the Steve Jackson's Games and their stuff, you're going to get a swath of stuff you actually do like. And on top of that, it's kind of just fun getting them. There's a certain commodity or certain value to just receiving a box of stuff and seeing what you get. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to, it's kind of like opening a booster pack of like a cards or something like that. You might want 1 thing, you might want 2 things, you might want none of it, but it was kind of fun to get anyway. So that's kind of where they're at here, and they're actually doing fairly well. 28,222 out of a 5,000 goal. So they're throwing in more dice and stuff like that. I like the rainbow dice here. The gradient there is kind of cool. So anyway, feel free to check it out if you want. I don't particularly care for this kind of stuff for me, though I don't pretend to assume everybody's like me, but I don't really like paying for something I don't know what I'm going to get. I'll pay premium to make sure I get it. I do that in like mobile games, free to play games all the time. If it's a chance, I won't spend any money. If it's a kind of ridiculous price, but I know I'm going to get it, I'll actually pay that ridiculous price if I really want it. And so this is kind of how I am. Okay, the horror game show, the board game, I showed this off so long ago, guys. I want to say 1.5 years, maybe even 2 years ago, I first showed this off. It's finally here on Kickstarter. It's about halfway funded, so we'll see how they go, see how they do here, and see if they can kind of get to there and then get to stretch goals. It's kind of an interesting idea. Essentially, you have to do a show of a horror film, if that makes sense. It's kind of like a Hunger Games, but for horror films. So hopefully that kind of sets the mood for you there. It is very over the top, very silly. You're going to see some homages to some people you might recognize, some people that kind of look familiar perhaps. So you'll get a lot of that. It's definitely done in a 80s horror style art, I would say, or I guess 80s style when it comes to the grittiness of the imagery. So hopefully that kind of sets the stage for that. Miniatures look okay. I mean, these are just renders, of course, but they are very plain. I imagine the fine details will not be there on these. It doesn't seem like that's going to be both financially responsible to maybe do that well, and it doesn't seem to be the goal. So stuff like the little tiny buttons on shirts and stuff like that, you might get, or even like this chain, and we'll see how well that chain shows up at the end, stuff like that. But they're serviceable, they're okay. A lot of it is standees. You're gonna get a lot of these kind of contestant and hunter standees and stuff like that as well. So that you're almost paying extra for these miniatures, and even then they're kind of in my opinion. They do have some stretch goals ready, including a clown, so that's kind of cool. But I think one of the issues here for this is it's a new creator, and with that, this is their game overview here. Now it works, it's serviceable, but it is quite small. There's not a lot to it. There's not any deep dives on like, okay, why is this interesting? Why, you know what I'm saying? Like you're not selling the potential of the mechanics. You're just selling the kind of the raw mechanics. And then even then kind of in a lackluster way, which is kind of unfortunate. They do have quite a few videos for you guys to watch those, so feel free to check those out. And because it is a standee game, you can get it for about $85, which still seems a bit high for me, but you know, indies kind of suffer from not having like 136 backers right now, right? So it's kind of hard to justify that because a lot of times there's minimum orders as well. All right, moving on from that, we have The Wilderness. This is one I was showing a while, because I think the actual design of the enemies seem really cool. Like, look at that anteater. That being said, Sally, this is the best you're going to see the minis. Down below, they actually have some fairly lackluster renders. You could, in Illustrator, pump these up and actually add some nice actual clarity to the texture with minimal effort. So I'm always kind of bummed to see that not happen. And I'm surprised that the person that could put this kind of graphic art together doesn't notice and can enhance those a little bit, because you're not even really like lying about it. You're just showing it off better. It's kind of like filming something with like a Nokia phone and then filming something with like an iPhone. Like obviously, even though it's the same product, it's going to look better. So you can definitely, I guess, show that off more. It has a big, long list of this stuff where it's just showing components. Every miniature, every person, and it has several expansions. You're going to go through all the expansions first, and then you get to game mechanics. This is the same with the other one, and I feel that's a mistake. I think a lot of ways you still have to sell the board game, and that needs to come at a little bit higher. In other words, I think you can have this big long scroll, but you'll see most do like a here's everything, here's how to play, here's everything in detail, and you'll kind of see that. And instead, they're kind of putting everything in detail up front, which is kind of a bummer. So people might have already checked out then. And again, game mechanics is like very, very little. Very, very little. There's like no information. So I don't know. It's kind of a bummer. And you get a sense that they're just selling minis and they're just trying to make a business as opposed to trying to sell a board game, and that's kind of their passion. You can often tell where the passion is based off of the effort they put into things. And from what I can tell, they put a lot of effort into this and not as much into showing off the board game that they supposedly are very proud of and created. So I think that's the problem there. I think that's preventing them from reaching their potential. All right, finally, this is going to kind of, I don't want to say set the mood, but set the stakes is probably a better term here. This is a comment I came across. Somebody posted this on Facebook. I don't even know what campaign it was to. One of the Peterson games, but I'll just go ahead and read it. My husband already died as we waited. I get the game and no one with whom to play it. It makes me very, very sad. I just want my money back for this and for the 2 other Peterson game Kickstarter projects we backed. Of course, like this game, that will never happen. We've talked about this with Kingdom Death Monster a lot, and how many people, how many backers we may have lost to COVID, waiting for a game, just the Gambler's Chest, nonetheless all the other expansions that have been so heavily delayed for that passion project. It's one of those, I just wish companies took a step back and realized the situation they're in. It's not just you working at your job for 40 hours a week, maybe even more, 9 to 5, maybe even more on a board game to make it. It's you for years and years of other people's lives having their money with nothing in return, for them waiting for you to send it, for you to come back with your promise when you took their money to begin with. And I feel that's lost on so many. I talk a lot about humanizing things, so I'm going to try to again, moving on into the subject. But often I focus on the humanization of the people behind the companies, because I yell at companies all the time, but there's still people involved there too, obviously. But it goes the other way as well. We're not just consumers, we're people. This person had a husband. The husband's dead, and she has nobody to play with. And that's just really kind of sad, right? I mean, it's that in a lot of different ways. But I don't think that for a moment, during any meeting at Peterson Games, they were like, how many backers do you think have died waiting for us to come back with what we told them we'd give them? That's never said, but it does happen. So with that in mind, Holy Grail Games is shutting down. Now, this is a rough one. Holy Grail Games definitely had a lot of a bad rap, and I think a lot of it was fully justified and earned. But they also had it because they were just obviously struggling. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I've done highlights. You can kind of see that here, and that's to guide my conversation with you and to draw attention to, I think, key points I want to speak on. So let's go ahead and do that. So the lockdown we experienced in 2020, both in France and for our production partners in China, caused us to take on huge delays. Now, this is interesting. Not everybody can work from home. I've experienced this firsthand. My first job in college was a paid intern for web development for a company out in Colorado. I was in Oklahoma going to school. And so, obviously, I worked remote. And they asked me, hey, you got a whole bunch of college students there. We need another guy. Why don't you go find somebody that, you think can do the job or whatever. And I found somebody who could technically do the job that wanted it. And so he joined up and he was part of the team. He was fired after about 3 months and never once turned in work. Because it turns out that sitting there with World of Warcraft available and web development, he chose World of Warcraft too many times, as in all the time. Which... I get it. I get it. As somebody that kind of struggles to focus sometimes, I get that not everybody can do the work from home very well. And that's unfortunate, but it is kind of the way of things here. Especially, I think, prevalent perhaps in board game development, because board games inherently are a natural, in-person thing. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible, or that it needs to have huge delays for that. There's tons of ways you can talk to people online, tons of ways that you can get together, you can stream things, you can do all sorts of things. And I think as a company, that if you have to continue to develop and do things and discuss things, that shouldn't really slow down too much. Now, the production in China or the factory where somebody has to actually be there, that is legitimate. But the one in France where it's just you developing and designing things, I don't think that's a legitimate claim at all. And I think you should have toughed it out and figured it out. At the end of the day, the human species is pretty smart, and we have been problem solving for a very long time. And I bet we can figure out how to call someone and how to make things happen. So I disagree with that part there on the whole French thing. I've seen that happen several times in the past where people are like, hey, it took us a long time to do this because we were trying to develop remotely. And it's like, it might take a little bit longer. Perhaps, it more likely you have to put a few more hours into it more than it needs to be a calendar delay, if that makes sense. But anyway, it wouldn't have been a big issue if it wasn't for some of the stuff we're about to get into. This affected abundance of production schedule, blocking the projects that we had been about to produce at the time, Museum Deluxe and Titans. So that's 2. As well as drastically slowing down the development of subsequent projects, Museum Pictora, Dominations Deluxe, and Rally Men Dirt. This is the issue. If you are finding that you cannot make things quickly, maybe you shouldn't then launch 3 other campaigns. This is something that you're going to see prevalent the entire time. Hey, we're struggling with this. Well, just keep launching campaigns. Well, we're struggling with this. Well, just keep launching campaigns. Now, I understand that, and they have some retail presence as well, but I understand that for a lot of these Kickstarters, that's how you get the money in. Right? And it's very hard, or for these companies doing Kickstarters, it's very hard to run a business while only getting money sometimes. Hopefully that makes sense as well. I do think there were a lot of smarter things to do. Obviously, this is hindsight. When it came to the scale things, we're going to talk about that as well. But I think taking on smaller things so you can still kind of receive money and still have some cash flow kind of steadily when it comes to that, while not killing yourselves with signing up for so much stuff like all 3 of these games can really help. Okay, Increased costs. Each time one of the new price increases occurred, as we know many did during COVID, we made the decision not to transfer any of these costs onto our backers, as we felt that we were able to absorb them by taking from our profit margins. That's something I want to point out here. There's a lot of talk about percentages, but I think people forget how percentages work. And what I mean by that is they'll say something like, hey, the production cost skyrocketed from 10 to 20%. That 10 to 20% of the manufacturing cost is not equivalent to the 30% or 30% plus of the profit margin on the entire sale, because the number is smaller, and so the percentage of that number is a smaller number. So for instance, if it costs them, let's say $30 to produce, and it normally would have cost them $25. That is a much bigger percentage difference than saying, hey, that means that we took that same percentage off of our sale of it of $90. Hopefully that makes sense. The percentages scale with the amount it is, and the production cost is typically much less. You got to remember the profit margin is after everything, after production costs, after shipping, after freight, after all this other stuff comes. All the costs, whatever's left over, that's the profit margin. And so it's a huge number for a percentage there, as opposed to quite small numbers, especially per unit. If you break it down even more than that, it might mean that you spent $3 more to make each box of game. Now, obviously that adds up to a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it is just a $3 increase per item. It's not going to kill an entire profit margin. Hopefully that makes sense. I think that's all these kind of percentages and stuff like that really tell a different story than I think is factually correct in that regards. You can definitely lie with statistics quite easily. And I don't mean lie to say that they're liars. I mean lie as in use statistics inappropriately to say a message that isn't backed on actual data. Hopefully that makes sense. I say that as somebody on a business intelligence team. Okay. This left us with a very fragile position, but we were confident. Now, this is the issue right here. This right here is the issue. They were in a very fragile position, but they were confident because they had one success that they could just keep having that. Now, this is, my problem here is it's kind of two-faced, because they're saying here that they were confident because of their growing success with Encyclopedia. So they're saying, hey, we are like in a super bad financing position. However, the stuff we're launching is doing very well. Encyclopedia did much better than a lot of their other stuff. But then later on, they say stuff like this. Using new projects to pay for old ones is dangerous and unsustainable. Okay, which I also disagree with. I'll talk more there, but yet you're talking about how your future campaigns are going to be fine, and therefore everything else is going to be fine. Well, you can't have both. If you didn't make enough for that, and you're saying you're not using that, then you're screwed on that no matter how much money you make. You could win the lottery and still be screwed there because you're not going to let the future thing pay for the past thing. It just doesn't make any logical sense. It's just words. It doesn't make sense. It's just there because people like to hear it, and I don't know. It's stupid. It's just stupid. Huge logistical challenge. Once our stock, I didn't get the O. Once our stock arrived in their warehouse, this is their distributor, in September, they took months to start sending it out. This is in green because it's actually quite true. This happens all the time. Like literally, I've heard so many developers talk to me about this, how they'll like get it there, but then you know, regardless of what company it is, the distributor can't do everything, right? If it's one distributor and it's all these Kickstarters coming in. And you know what? The same for production. You can submit your files and say, hey, we're ready to produce. But if the machines are being used for another game, then they're being used for another game. And if you're in line 3 behind, you're in line 3 behind. It's how that works. It's how it works throughout the entire process. If the containers are being used, if the machines are being used to produce it, if the people in charge of figuring out where it goes in the truck's being used as final delivery, all of that has a queue. It happens all the time. It really does. And so I don't get why they would think this is weird. And in fact, I'm surprised they think it is. I almost can't imagine that this is new to them. Maybe they had lucked out and they just used production companies that had nothing going on, I guess, and could just instantly make it for them. And then also distributed companies that weren't distributing any other games and could gladly just take on more. Yeah, sure, why not? But honestly, it's not the case a lot of the times. I'm not saying all the time, but I have heard literally probably dozens of developers have told me about this. It's just a very common thing. And it makes sense too, right? I mean, they'll get to it when they can get to it. If they're swamped, they're swamped. This is what it is. Okay. And normally you kind of have a sense of it too. And in fact, nothing is as simple as what's laid out. What I mean by that is, if you were delayed in production, then maybe you got to them late, and maybe originally they said, oh yeah, we have time. You said you're going to deliver in August? Yeah, in August we should be able to send it right away. But then you don't get to them until late September or early October because you were delayed on some other thing back there. Well, they may have gone ahead and started doing another thing. Okay, well now we'll have to fit you back there. It's how these things work. It's the logistics around there is a reason why third-party logistics or 3PLs exist. And it's because it's so complex to make these things and send them, and there's all the different pieces. You can imagine the Gantt chart that you would see of like interconnected dependencies from one to another and how that can change and how one mess up in one part of the line can then cause mess ups in others, and with the cascading failure of delays and whatnot. It happens. It's part of everything. Okay. Our next Kickstarter campaign, Culp and Dying City, did not do anywhere near as well as we'd hoped. Again, looking at a future campaign, I'd like to point that out. We knew that the situation had cost us the support of our large community. The delays also cost us to miss key retail release dates and sale periods for Black Friday and Christmas. Very true. Again, it happens to companies all the time, where you remember when Star Wars couldn't get Grogu toys in time for Christmas? That was a big thing, right? Baby Yoda at the time. I don't think he had a name, but that was a big thing. Christmas came, everybody loved it, and there were no toys there. Happens all the time. Just part of doing business. It just happens. So if stuff might blow up months before Christmas, guess what? You missed it or whatever. It is what it is. Okay. So right here, using new projects to pay for old ones is dangerous and unsustainable. Let me go in and kill this right now, because I see so many people say this, and I understand the idea. The idea is that you can't keep hoping the future will fix the past. However, that's not how anything works. And what I mean by that is, it's just like looking at, let's just zone it into one Kickstarter. You're trying to make the pricing structure for one Kickstarter. You got dice, you got an expansion, you got a miniature upgrade where you upgrade the enemies, you have a storage solution, you got some sleeves, you maybe got a neoprene mat and the core box, right? You got 7 or 8 things that you're offering. Now, with all of that, how do you price it? Do you price it to where every single thing has to make a profit? And if so, the same amount of profit? I promise you, nobody's pricing things that way. They're looking at it as a whole, trying to figure out who's going to buy what and what market trends are and stuff like that, and pricing it accordingly to where ideally nothing is sinking you, but all of it together provides you that profit. Because stuff like I say all the time, dice and neoprene mats make bank. It's like printing money, guys. There is so much profit in that. So much profit in that. Because what we pay versus what they pay to actually make it is a joke. And I don't mean that as in we're getting a bad deal, right? Money is a perception of value and blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't have to be tied with how much it costs to actually make. But that being said, it does not cost hardly anything to make dice. It's super cheap. And then they sell it to you for over $1 a dice. Trust me, it does not cost them anywhere close to that. Not even close. Okay, and neoprene mats, same thing. They're actually quite cheap to make, even the stitched ones. So it's like a no-brainer because you can sell it for $45, $50 and people will buy it. So stuff like that offsets other things. You've heard of loss leaders and stuff like that. I don't want to get too into it. I guess video game consoles are a common thing, or shavers, like a Gillette or something like that, right? They give you the initial product at a loss, but it's because then they make money in other locations. It's just how these things work, and nothing is so complex or so simple that it's so straightforward that it's like that. You are using things to pay for other things and vice versa all the time. And it makes sense too, because there will be some things where you might end up losing money. And if you never put any future money into that, then it will forever be undelivered. Every time a company deliver something that was not profitable, they used profit from other things to pay for that. It's how that works. Otherwise, it would never deliver. You're stuck with that money. The idea that you're siloing funds for Rally Dirt or something like that, and only Rally Dirt money can pay for Rally Dirt's delivery, is not only stupid, but it's just not how. It's a lie. It's a fantasy. It's something people say because that sounds good. But if Rally Dirt didn't make money, you should put money in there to get it out the door and deliver it, and do better next time. So this whole using projects to pay for old ones is dangerous and unsustainable. I understand the concept, and definitely it's not a trend you want to do. But it is sometimes necessary, and it does make sense in a lot of ways. Now, you shouldn't launch a project solely to do that, and there's a lot of nuance around that. I could talk about it for forever. We're going to move on from that, but it's a silly statement. As of this week, we will lose access to all of our email and work accounts, and our team will be laid off. Effective immediately, they're filing for bankruptcy. People are taking their assets, paying off creditors, all this kind of stuff, right? I wanted to point this out, that they're losing access to all their email and work accounts, and they're all laid off because it doesn't match up with a lot of the stuff they're saying in the update. So we're going to talk about that. It's unfortunate. It really, really is. Just a bad situation, but they just kept launching stuff and it was just bad. So let's go ahead and look at Copan. This was their last one they did. Had exactly 1,000 backers, kind of a cool even number there. I'm sure they thought it would have been more. It made about 67,000. As they said, it did not make nearly as much to fix their previous problems. The stuff they said is dangerous and unsustainable and you should never do. So that's why they decided to stop it, except when they did it with Copan. Again, there's a lot of BS there, okay? But this didn't work out. Now, I would like to point out that they were in a fragile situation, as I said. Their finances were bad. They were not good, and they were not good for quite a while, right? We're talking about 2022 here, okay? So, really bad. Nowhere here does it tell the consumer, hey, by the way, if this is the Anasteer, right? If this doesn't do as well as we hope, we're folding. We are that close to breaking. Not only does it not say that, but it gives the impression that it's the opposite. They have prototypes they sent out to game reviewers. They have the Tabletopia mod. They have all the art done. They have all this nice professional tokens. Everything looks great. Everything looks fine. It looks like it's ready to be printed and paid for and shipped. And there's no issue whatsoever. In fact, you're going to get to the bottom here where it talks about like risks, right? There is actually a required, look, they were even paying Jillip to advertise and stuff like that. Risks and challenges. This is your spot. You're forced to put on Kickstarter for any issues that people should be aware of. Now, that's not listed here. Instead, it's just two little things here, and then like the user agreement essentially. But it says here, we currently have 3 other Kickstarter projects which will be fulfilling whilst this project is running. Rallyman Dirt, you had no way of paying for it. You haven't even received the bill and you were like really struggling. Domination Deluxe and Encyclopedia. These should be completed before the campaign of Copan ends. They thought that all 3 of those, after all their delays, were going to be completely done by the time this campaign ended. No. And they talked about how, hey, we've learned and adapted to the events of the global pandemic. Our projects are now much more advanced and pre-production already well underway. Look at all this confidence they're building for a company that is self-describing themselves as financially fragile. Nowhere in this risks and challenges section do they tell you, the consumer, that. You were led to believe that they have everything under control, that everything is hunky-dory, everything is peachy, please give us our money. There's no risk. No risk mentioned at all. In fact, hey, those 3 games that we haven't delivered, don't worry. They're going to be done by the time this campaign even ends. And in just a couple weeks, they're going to be done. It's going to be easy peasy, lemon squeezy. No worries whatsoever. The company's doing great. Everything's fine. If there was a risk, we would tell you in the risks section, right? Wrong. Wrong. Now, I understand that you have to be able to sell stuff, right? If you're doing bad and you keep telling people, hey, I'm financially insecure, would you pay me money? Nobody's going to do that. Totally get it. Kind of. You see, the crowdfunding space is amazing at rallying. They really are. They really are. In fact, we're kind of used to it at this point. But more than that, The problem is, look at the scope of this. Look at the scope of Copen. Now, if you are a struggling company, financially struggling, can't pay your bills, haven't been able to deliver, you're screwed over, and every other revenue source besides retail, which you're still hoping might work out, it didn't, would you make this big old board game and put it on there and then just say everything's fine and pretend like it's all good and put yourself on the line for this? Again, this happened with Anastair too. Or do you do something small? Do a card game. Take some of this art and take some of the card gameplay of it and make a fun little card game. Do stuff that is smart where the profit margin's high, you're doing quite well, and all you need to do is, again, get that cash flow so that your future stuff can pay for your old stuff. It's how it works if the old stuff didn't make enough money. But you're not putting yourself on the line for some huge thing to 1,000 backers. 1,000 people signed up for this thinking they were going to get their game. And Holy Grail Games knew that they were at a high risk for it. Not only that, but when it didn't make enough, when it didn't make nearly enough, as they said, they did not cancel it. They didn't say at the last minute, oh, never mind, sorry, didn't make enough. Nope. They said, actually, let's close out, let's get their money, and then let's just get screwed over later. Unfortunate to be that misleading, unfortunate to just be that bad at business that you would just sign up for something like this without the ability to pay for it. And yeah, people aren't going to get their games, guys. That's this is dead. This is dead. Here's Encyclopedia. Here's their update for Encyclopedia. And we'll get to Realm and Dirt in a moment here. The overwhelming majority of you have already received your games. Now, this came out after Rallyman Dirt, so how did the majority of people get their games here when they didn't for Rallyman? Except, again, for that kind of silo. Like I said, you get this issue where, as your company, you have Encyclopedia, which just made a lot more money than you are used to, right? 300,000, 4,000 backers, that's really good for Holy Grail Games, okay? So you did a really good job, and you've made a profit on this, but you look over to just off to the right, just off camera, and you see Rallyman Dirt sitting there in the red. You know you've lost money. It's a sinkhole of a project. You're not going to gain any money from working on that anymore. Do you work on Encyclopedia, or do you go back over to Rallyman Dirt, the loss, and say, you know what, let's waste money here? No, you don't. So you go and you make this and you deliver it, and you're fine doing that because this is a good project and you don't touch that old one. Happens all the time. It's why you see so many delays with a lot of this. That's why Chronicle X by Archon Studio was delayed so long. It's because they didn't make any money on it. They were making great money on this other stuff, so they're going to deliver that and not work on Chronicle X, except every now and then to finally get it out the door and good riddance. But what does that say to backers? Well, it's the same thing here, right? They were focused on stuff there, and they knew Rallyman Dirt was screwed over, and they didn't want to work on the screw up. Look at Rallyman Dirt. I'm going to be scrolling into the comments on this one. Okay, so as they have the entirety of our stock in their warehouse, again, that's Bolieres or whatever, not just for Rallyman, but all their other new releases, again, they kept releasing stuff. They just kept making campaigns over and over again. And again, this is what got Peterson Games. This is what got Blacklist. This is what gets all these other companies, Mythic Games, where they just keep on trucking along with these big campaigns, hoping that someday eventually it pays off. They might claim in their thing here that it's dangerous and unsustainable, but they certainly did it. That's pretty obvious. And then they put all their eggs in one basket and the basket got screwed over. Imagine that. So they're not even doing financially sound things like making smaller stuff. My goodness. Our finances, look, all this has been cast on a drain on our finances, which were already fragile. Again, if they were already fragile, then why is that not on your risks and challenges anywhere? Why are you not mentioning how your fragile finances? Hey, we might be screwed over. Please buy this big game that we were saying we're going to make. We are waiting to see if it will be possible for you to contact them directly or vice versa to arrange the shipping of your games. It does not look like it for multiple reasons. First of all, they are not as big a distributor as others, and they have no capacity for doing this when it comes to allowing you to pay them to get the game. Additionally, the bankruptcy process in France, from what I can gather, means that essentially the government has kind of taken control of all of their assets and now is just trying to pay off creditors and stuff like that. So what that means is that they can't access their games anyway. So like they can't even release them. They're not. It's not a thing. You're not going to get your game. At least not likely. That's what it seems like here. Now, look at this. Our small team of 5 has been given their all over the past few years to get Rallyman and our other games out to backers. Despite this, we are now losing our livelihoods along with years of work. Now, this is important to note that there are now some people without a job, and that sucks. It sucks, especially if it wasn't your fault, right? Now, not everybody's in a decision-making process at a company. And so when a company goes down, that doesn't mean that Betty, the accountant, needs to. Or doesn't mean that, Frank, the guy who answered phones, needs to be blamed. And I understand that's not a team of 5, but you get what I'm saying? Like, not everybody's in a position of making the decisions that sink the ship, but they're still drowning with the ship anyway. That really sucks. It really does. It really sucks because everybody loses, but the people that lose the most are probably the people that weren't the cause of the issue anyway. It is with our best interest to do so. And this is for letting you know that we did everything we could and explored every option possible to make this work. Okay, so they were like, hey, we really tried to get this to work. It was in our best interest to do so, not just in order to get your games to you, but also to keep our jobs. That is one of the most explicitly honest things they have said. Essentially, like at the end of the day, they want to get paid, which is why they launch campaigns. It's why they try so hard to string it along as long as possible. Nobody wants to lose their job. And so it's not just, hey, I made a promise to these backers. I took their money for years and I didn't give them anything. It's, I want my paycheck Friday because I want to take my wife on a date, or I want to buy a gift for my daughter, or, I want to, buy some new clothes or pay my electricity or my heating bill in the UK or anything like that, right? It's their job and they want to keep their job. And so they're going to do what they need to do to make sure the money keeps flowing. Whether that's good for you or not, depends on how they decide to get to that money. They decided to keep launching stuff like this instead of being smart about it, but whatever. Let's go in and scroll past the French and get into some comments. What are you guys saying here? Now, this is interesting. Spoke with a rep at their office, and they say that it's roughly 180,000 Canadian dollars that is owed before the games can be shipped. That's roughly comes to $50 Canadian per backer. Canadian dollaroos are like, I don't know. That's like $25 US, right? I don't know. Either that or it's like way more. I have no clue. I have no clue what their fake dollar is to the real dollar. But either way, $50 is pretty on par with what others have asked. Like, hey, give us this money to ship it. Now, $50 for the game the size of Rallyman, that's a pretty tall order, but it is possible. And they never did ask. Like, they just said, oh, nope, guess we're done. Good luck with your games. Would have been nice for them to at least give an out there saying like, hey, like, I guess the issue is they're just not upfront about this. Like, what they should have been doing instead of these shipping updates is, look, we are 180 in the hole, right? Like, just say that. If we get $180, you get your games, or $180,000. Well, here's what we're going to do it. We can try and sell that card pack, try and sell digital art, try and sell dice pack, try and do this, get angel investors, try and get a funding for it, hey, like what Mythic Games is doing. At least they're doing that. This company didn't. Not once. It's just, hey, guess you guys are screwed. Hope you didn't want your game. Really unfortunate. Really, really unfortunate. And then, if you scroll all the way down here, plenty of creators figured it out. Period. End. Done. Submit. That's it. For whatever reason, I feel like game developers don't talk to each other enough. From what I can tell, there's certain cliques or certain groups that talk among each other. And they all typically make kind of similar games and kind of similar. And I get having friends. But from a professional standpoint, I feel like there's just not enough communication. Why is it that when a company's struggling financially, they don't call up, hey, look, could I have a meeting with your CEO or whatever? I know you guys are in a similar situation. I see you guys made it out. Can I just talk to you like off the cuff? Like, let's go have dinner somewhere. or let's meet online, let's do something and just talk. Like, can you give me some pointers, right? Some mentorship as somebody who's been through this. Other companies figure this out. You're not in a vacuum. Look at what others are doing. Ask, talk to them. It boggles my mind that this doesn't happen more often. Like, why aren't you talking with people who have been through this already? It just sucks. And at the end of the day, again, figured it out. Like I said, people are smart. They are. Human beings are really crafty little buggers, and we can figure things out. We can make things happen. We can make it work. It's really unfortunate. Really unfortunate that this happened, that backers aren't getting what they want. And it's such a big blow, once again, to the Kickstarter board game community. It's the downward trend is a multitude of things, and it's not just inflation. It's not just a recession. It's not just the fact that people have less money to spend. It's that they're not willing to spend it when stuff like this happens. It really sucks. And it really sucks that you were multiple games out, that you were so far down it, still offering these big games. Like, I know Encyclopedia did well, but you shouldn't have even gotten that far, guys. I mean, that was a big game too, but you delivered that one fine, so I don't know. Just, anyway, let me know your thoughts down below, of course. And feel free to check out these other games that I did show, whether it's the indies, maybe give them some pointers, maybe give them some of your money if you believe in them and you think they'll do well. If you want a loot box thing, or maybe you want some super expensive terrain that looks fantastic, you can do that as well. Guys, take care. I'll talk to you guys in real soon. Bye, guys.